leaders actually made a point to say that the national debt is a major national security issue, something that is or is not being talked about in this campaign. So not far be it from me to suggest ideas to you, but take it away.
What do I need? Do I need a mic? No, we're good. Everybody hears us fine? First, the idea that Sam Feist would give me an idea that I don't take is ridiculous, because he is the engine of a lot of our political thinking at CNN. So a round of applause for him. Thank you very much for being here. You are in for a real treat. Madeleine Albright is one of the most deft minds we have to discuss the relationship between security and policy in America. You could not have a better opportunity to have a drink and to have Madeleine Albright. I mean, talk about your perfect first date. So, Feist put out this suggestion about a connection between national security and the national debt. I don't get it. I don't see the two as being related. How so?
Well, definitely. First of all, I'm delighted to be here and happy to be with everybody here. And
is that true? Are you really happy?
I am. I think this is a great place. I love to see all these people, and I always love talking to you. So that is so. I do think that it is hard to get your head around it, but there's no question that our national debt, there's a question about how it affects our solvency and also, therefore, our security. We have to be able to pay for what we want, and we have to figure out how to pay for it, and we have to figure out how then our budget is distributed. And it is one of the crucial aspects of our democracy is trying to figure out how to do that. The president proposes a budget, and Congress then decides to vote on it and tries to figure out where the money goes. And when you are Secretary of State, for instance, you go and you argue on behalf of what you need for your budget. And by the way, I found something that I did. Our budget was never as big as I wanted it, especially for assistance programs. So I would call President Clinton on Christmas Eve and say, I need a little bit more money.
You went with the full Tiny Tim.
Well, exactly. You know, and I sometimes managed to get an increase. And the part that people, it really is a big surprise, the State Department budget is about 1/10 the size of the Defense Department budget. So I would argue saying we actually did need more money. But the bottom line is that I think that the argument being made on behalf of having a budget that makes sense, that makes us fiscally responsible and solvent, is very important for our national security.
So Pete Peterson, whom we both know and love, and for those of you out there who the name Pete Peterson is somewhat new to you, it is worth a Google. Yeah. Pete is one of the great Americans. He is somebody that we're going to have to try to figure out how to repopulate in this next generation, somebody who has tremendous success, tremendous means, who felt in his case, in Pete's case, because of ethnic pride as being a new immigrant in this country, and his family as a Greek man, he felt indebted to the country. But we're going to have to replace his kind of philanthropy and his kind of idea of being an engine of making America a better place. So it's worth a Google of Pete Peterson. He says to me the first time this conversation comes up, and he was like, you know, you're sleeping on the debt. You're sleeping on it when you interview these people about the debt, when you interview these candidates. I was like, yeah, I'm talking about national security, though, Pete. You know, I'll talk about the debt when we're talking about fiscal. He goes, you don't get it.
Nope.
He's like, your hands are tied. One, you're asking them to do things they can't pay for. And two, they have an amount of paper out there that people hold that creates leverage in these situations. He says China holding paper is leverage. And you have to know that. It's a security issue. You agree?
Absolutely. And I think that we don't understand, well, we understand personal debt. We know that if we owe somebody a lot of money, they own us. And so I think we have to be very careful about who buys up our money, how we operate, and to recognize the fact that what is effective in your personal life of being irresponsible for what you owe and what you spend money on, and do you run up a big debt and all of a sudden find you can't do anything. It's hard to take those huge numbers. Nobody thinks in trillions of dollars. But the bottom line is, it is the way that we make clear what kind of a country we are, that we live up to when we owe people things, that we do think that it is the way that we fulfill the social contract. What happens is people have always gotten together and given up a certain amount of rights in order to have the government help you out in places and provide the security that we need, both domestic and foreign. And it is the price of democracy. And I think that we need to make absolutely clear that we are honest, that we are responsible for what we owe, and we are responsible to our people, and the budget of the United States is the translation of that.
Madeleine, very often, because you have been doing so many great things for so long, people overlook the personal accomplishment aspect of your life, that you become these offices that you've held at the highest levels. I grew up in a household where you were always mentioned as, now that Albright. Now she is somebody who really knows how to fight the good fight. Hal, you have been serving in some capacity of public service since the 70s. What was the engine for you to keep you going, helping you to break through the barriers that used to exist in a way that we can't even imagine today as a woman to achieve what you have?
I don't want to sound hokey about this, but the bottom line is I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was 11 years old. My father was a Czechoslovak diplomat, and we came to the United States because he didn't want to live under communism. And I came here, I had the second time actually that I was a refugee. We had spent the World War II, I'm really old, in London. My father was with the Czechoslovak government in exile. As a little girl, I spent a lot of time in air raid shelters, and I know what it was like to give up freedom. So we came to the United States, and when people ask me to describe myself in 2 words, grateful American. And the most important thing that ever happened to me was becoming an American. And so I think I really was driven by the fact of wanting to make a difference and pay back. I also was the oldest child. I always wanted to be the perfect daughter. I'm old, my father's dead, I still want to be the perfect daughter. And so I worked hard, but mostly, and as I said, I don't want to sound hokey, but I really am a very, very grateful American, and I had the opportunity that it never occurred to me that I would have, is to be able to sit behind a sign that said the United States. You talked about the UN. First time that happened to me, I arrive at the United Nations, and I see this sign that says the United States, and I think the women in this audience will identify with this, and I thought, well, I won't talk today because I don't know anybody, and I don't know if they're like me. And, you know, maybe they'll think what I say is stupid, and so I won't say anything. And then I saw the sign that said the United States, and I thought, if I don't talk today, then the voice of the United States will not be heard. And that has really motivated me. And to have the opportunity to make a difference as somebody that had something to do with American foreign policy was beyond my belief in terms of opportunities. And I do work hard. I really do.
Think about how you describe yourself in 2 words, by the way. That's not easy, right? Mine would be dad bod, I think, at this point. That'd be my 2 words. It's not as deep as yours, but for me it fits.
Yeah.
So let's have a little fun with this. They have a very important decision they have to make coming up. If they watch our show or our network, you'll know to the day how many days you have until you have to make it. So when it comes to national security, you're going to hear about it in your first debate. The state of play will be not the complexity of the issue, and it is. Madeleine and I were talking before we came on tonight. She says the biggest thing that has changed in terms of how you understand the threats in this world are the complexity of them. Cold War was easy, Madeleine said, on one level, because you knew what it was, you knew what the rules were of this state of play. You don't anymore. ISIS isn't even a nation state. But they're going to hear about it in the debate, and the main basis will be, are you safe at home or not? And you're going to have Hillary Clinton advancing the proposition that, look, we're safe, but we have to continue what we're doing. You're going to have the opposition in Donald Trump who's saying we are not safe. Let's take on that discussion because you're going to hear it. You'll get an advance from one of the best minds in the world. So the basic supposition is this. We're not safe. We just saw it with Rahami. We don't say his name on CNN except when we absolutely have to because we're hoping to not give any credibility to the sensationalism of this kind of evil. But there are a lot of him. It keeps happening. It keeps happening. It seems like every month and a half. We've never dealt with this before. We're not as safe as we were, and it's because of the Democrats. It's gotten worse under Obama. I'm not safe. That's the proposition. How do you defend it?
Well, before I will answer that, but let me just say this.
You're
You were
dodging
talking.
my question
No, I'm
right
not.
off the
No. You're going to
me
be
take it
very surprised at what I said. The bottom line, you were talking about a vote. I was just in the bathroom where the wallpaper is all about John Kennedy. My first vote was for John Kennedy in Chicago, and it really counted. And it made me
twice.
so proud. But
You were gonna laugh
I
at that.
thought about, I hope it did, but the bottom line is you think about the vote and how important it is, and so I do hope that people really think about the privilege of voting. There are a lot of people in the world who stand in very long lines in order to vote, whether it's hot or in the rain, and what I hope is that people recognize the privilege of voting and that they really do it. So let me just say this. I do think we're safe. I think that we are safer than many people in many countries, and what bothers me is that we are going to succumb to what I call the fear factor. I think that there have been, I think you've even said this on your show, is how many people have died in car accidents and in ways. And so while it really is terrible when somebody decides for whatever reason that they're going to blow other people up, I do think that we cannot operate in this election on the basis of the fear factor.
I've changed my mind. You are trying to, with the Democrats, dissuade me and distract me from my real fear. Muslims are doing these attacks. We see it almost every time. You cannot stop them because you have a porous border system and a lousy ICE system that does the vetting. They're getting in here. You don't track them. And you're doing it in the interest of a liberal kind of congratulatory hug around the world, and it's putting me and my kids at risk. I want somebody who's not going to do that.
Well, I believe that you need to understand what the threat really is. The world is a mess. There's no question. That's a diplomatic term of art. But the bottom line is there are all kinds of threats that are a variety of kinds. Are they a threat to the United States? I think there are threats to the United States. What's happening in the Middle East in a number of different ways, all kinds of things, climate change, disease. We live in a world where we are not immune to everything. But is the threat to the United States something that makes you decide who can keep you safer? I believe that you cannot make us safer by making us all terrified of each other and of people that look and act differently. I had a very interesting time last week meeting with some refugees. And there were two people there that were Muslims that had come to the United States. One was a young man from Bosnia who had escaped from Bosnia twice and came to the United States and enlisted in the Marines for 20 years. Another was a young woman who was a Muslim who went to Boise, Idaho, and a place that hasn't seen a lot of Muslims. She was learning English. She was also learning to drive. She made herself a part of that community, and people understood that she wanted to be somebody that contributed to America. We can't just decide that everybody that's a different religion is a threat to us. I think we need to understand what is going on. There are very serious issues. By the way, when there are descriptions about how to make bombs on television, that doesn't help. And I do think that what we have to do is understand that the strength of our country is our diversity, and that refugees actually can, in fact, provide some payback and really help this country.
Before I test the proposition of you trying to let everyone in the world come in to kill me, did you just take a shot at me for putting bomb prescriptions on television?
Something like
that. Was that me? That was very clever. We have never done that. But I'm
No,
going to
there are others.
teach you a lesson.
There are others who have, that you can get it, and I do think, I think what is interesting is trying to figure out how much information is really useful to people and how much is harmful. I believe in the freedom of the press and in information and people knowing things, but we have the issues of copycats. That's
True.
Clearly one of the things.
True, although you know that the intelligence community will also often say that what we put on television is already known by those who need to know it. But you're right, it's a little bit of a delicate balance. But don't distract me, Madeleine. You were
God
talking
forbid.
about refugees. You mentioned three. I'm saying that the proposition is this. They are the most risky people to let in the country. This is the argument that you'll be made. You can't tell who they are. You don't know where they're coming from. The bad guys slip in with the good guys. And the days where America can accept everybody are over, because Islam has a real problem. They have a problem with us, and we see it playing out all the time. We're the main target, and the democratic remedy is let in more of them out of some type of nod to universal respect, but you're putting us at risk. And that's why what we need is to keep them out until we can figure out who's safe, put ourselves first.
Well, first of all, I don't know how many people here remember Timothy McVeigh, a Christian who blew up a building.
Most people killed in a terror attack in the United States, except for 9/11, if you combine all of them since, all of the lives that we've lost, less than in Oklahoma City, except for 9/11.
Yeah. I mean, I think that really is
I'm not going to
something
make any more points for
to
you,
remember.
Albright. That was the last one.
No, but let me just say this. I do think that it's pretty rigorous in terms of the vetting process that goes on.
Explain that to me. I don't understand. I feel like we don't know who these people are, and you let them in anyway. The refugees, we know the least about them. That's what I've heard.
Well,
We don't know who cops are, but they become cops and they kill people all the time.
And there's them.
no, I mean, I do think that we have to figure out, it isn't just foreigners. I happen to agree with that. It isn't just foreigners. And I think that there are always people, I've seen that there's this whole chart that has come out from the Homeland Security people that show like 46 steps of people that before you get in. And I do think that truly there is a very careful system in terms of trying to figure it out. I do think that nothing is totally perfect. There's nothing in the world that's totally perfect. But I do think that we are richer for the people that are allowed to come into this country, that want to be a part of it. And I honestly think the idea of building walls and then deciding that X people can't come in is totally undermining what America is about. We are a country of diversity, and I know it always sounds kind of self-serving when I say, you know, refugees actually help this country. But the bottom line is, I think that we would be much poorer if we did not let people in, and we cannot decide that groups of people, just for who they are, nothing for what they've ever done, are excluded from this country.
One pause to the back and forth to reiterate a point that you made on the show once, that the perception of America abroad. I was asking you one day about, well, if we really don't know what we're doing with this vetting, maybe a pause wouldn't be, and you said, you're just thinking about it here domestically. What about what America means to other countries and how they perceive what we do and how it affects alliances? Put some meat on the bones of that for me.
Well,
how does it hurt us abroad if we say we're locking down our system here?
I think that people see America in different ways, but I think most people see us as a country that does have the Statue of Liberty, that has been a beacon of hope. And the thing that I have found that's happened recently, and we're here during the General Assembly session, the number of foreigners that have come to me and said, what is going on here? We have never seen anything like this. Or have you people gone crazy? And why will you, all the things that America has stood for, what has happened? Don't you believe that other countries need to be able to exist, to be our partners in dealing with various problems? Don't you see that your reputation as a country of moral values that has believed to be the shining city on the hill, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, people have believed in what we have done. And this is, I happen to believe this is an exceptional country. And I think the only problem that happens is when we ask that exceptions be made for us, when we think it's okay for us to torture people, or decide that we are going to make all the rules in the world. But it is an exceptional country when, in fact, people that were not born here are able to participate and contribute to this country.
And the other side, succinctly, is this. You are a good person, Madeleine Albright. You're all heart. Too much. We need to be tougher now. The days of being nice with these people who want to kill us, they're over. You have to match tactics. You have to do that. And you also have to take a plain look at how we got where we are today and Hillary Clinton's name is all over it. This is her fault. She was there as Secretary of State, and then it was the Obama administration, and she supports that. She would continue what he did. This is why we're unsafe. We have to be tougher, which you Democrats don't like to do, and we have to own that we got here because of the faults of your party, and we need change.
Well, let me tell you this. There's some people who think that I was pretty tough. Ask Milosevic. And I really do think that we were able to use the power of America in order to stop genocidal killing in the Balkans. And there are people who kind of thought that, and we are tough. Democrats are tough because we understand how to protect this country. But we cannot, and you know what's interesting, Chris, the idea is, how far back do you go? How did this all begin? And I do think that we have to understand that we cannot go around invading countries. We need to...
I don't want to go back that far. For the sake of this discussion, I only want to go back to Obama. Don't get me in trouble with how we got into Iraq in the first place.
Okay.
That does not help my analysis. Only Obama. That's especially when Clinton was there. That's the argument that's being made, is that the status quo right now of our is only because of these last 8 years.
There is a word for that, BS. The bottom, it's just two letters.
I don't want to nitpick.
Two letters. But I honestly think that if you look at the record in terms of, let me just say, I think that there are those who, well, let me go back on something, because I think the part that is very interesting, you may not like this, but when we were leaving, the Clinton administration was leaving, we went to the Bush administration and tried to explain to them that there were terrorist threats. There was not a meeting about terrorism by the Bush administration until after 9/11. So I think that one does have to kind of look at the record. I do think the following thing, that Secretary Clinton and President Obama have made very clear where America stands up, what we have to do, and the most important part is that they understand that we need to deal with the complicated mess in the world with other countries as partners. Americans don't like the word multilateralism. It has too many syllables and it ends in an ism. But the bottom line is it just means partnerships, and we are tough where we need to be tough, and we have dialogue where we need dialogue, and Secretary Clinton and President Obama have in fact now worked with the Iranians on a nuclear program that has taken away their capability of having a nuclear weapon.
May I weigh in? First of all, we said no phonics when we were back there. You said there would be no phonics, and now you're talking about multilateralism.
I know.
I'm putting
I'm
my
so
hand on
sorry.
my chin. I'm trying to get through the syllables in it,
I'm
and I'm confused. But I do remember this.
Many.
Afterwards. I don't want to take up their time with this. Because you're making a strong case that is going to be countered. Artfully or not, it's going to be countered. And the basis of it will be this. ISIS, Obama called them the JV team. And no matter what the reality is of what's done and what's being done, he called them that. He was wrong. And that is being used to feed a perception that he never got it. And of course, there are all this ugliness that I won't even do for the sake of argument in terms of why he would get it or not, because it's silly. It's actually worse than silly. But then you have Iran, you said. Iran is also being used as a metaphor out on the hustings. Look at what they gave that country. They gave them billions of dollars in cash. And they gave them a deal that nobody believes that they will live up to. And they did it just because they're weak, and the Iranians are laughing at us because we're weak now. Weak versus strength. Weak versus strength. How do you take that on?
I do think that what we have been concerned about is the possibility of nuclear proliferation. President Obama has taken it on very strongly, as did Secretary Clinton. And what you do is try to get rid of a particular part of the threat. Let me just tell you, when you are in these jobs, you can't do everything all at once. So you take it piecemeal, and we were able, in fact, as a result of very careful negotiation, to make sure that they don't, there's this kind of, what is their breakout period? How long would it take them to have a nuclear weapon? That is something that they have dealt with through this negotiation, are able to make that period much longer for them, and made sure that they can't hurt us. Now, have we dealt with everything to do with Iran? No. That is part of the next phase. But I also do think that we need to understand that this country has to operate within a very complex world that has no rules at the moment, and that you need people that actually know where the countries are, don't say stupid things that make everybody very nervous, and say that they can wipe out ISIS with one blow. I mean, I think...
Are you talking about me, or have you moved on to somebody?
No, I'm talking about somebody else who has yellow hair.
All right.
And so you don't even look like, you know. But who basically, I am stunned. I teach. He would flunk my course.
Because you don't like him. He'd flunk the moment he walked in.
No. Well, no, I always give my students a chance.
Oh, well, that's nice.
But the bottom line is, it requires some understanding of what America's position in the world is, some understanding of what the tools in the national security toolbox are, some knowledge of where the countries actually are, being capable of answering more than one answer for one. I know people don't like to hear it's complicated, but it is complicated, and people are listening to us. And when you say you don't want NATO, or when you say that it's fine for the Russians to have taken Crimea.
But he's so strong, and we're so weak. Putin is a strong guy. Strong is good. You may not like how strong he is in the ways that he's strong, but he is strong. I know that sounds like completely fucking ridiculous, but it has been said, and people were like, yeah, he is. You got to give him that.
Well,
the guy is like a sadistic, crazy murderer, but it's working in this election right now.
So let me tell you, we started talking about budgets and national security. Russia
Putin
is a mess.
Keep your madmen separate.
Russia is a country whose economy is in bad shape because it was based all on oil. Oil is going down. You have a leader of a country that runs, it's authoritarian. To admire him kind of blows my mind, frankly.
So what do we, but here's the instructive point, okay? Because sometimes covering this election, you have to look past the first level of what seems, you get these waves of rejection when you're dealing with the Trump campaign. Like, I can't believe he just said that. I can't believe, and we used to have a game early on almost, well, that's it, his campaign's over now. You can't say what he just said about this group. You can't say what he just said about this. And he kept going and kept going. And at first, you know, we were trying to figure out why that was. Well, maybe it's us. Maybe we're propping him up. Maybe we're giving him the attention. And there are those who believe that that's all it was. I do not. One, on a personal level, I have no problem making this argument because I've been going at him from jump, and I think with good reason. But it's something else. The notion that is so repugnant to you that you would ever cotton to Vladimir Putin on the basis of strength, given what he has done. Why is it working? It is working because he is being used as a rejection of the status quo here. And that strength is simple, but it is compelling and intoxicating even to some people. And that even Vladimir Putin, who people should know on instinct, is no one to cotton to in terms of American values. Because he is strong, and there's such a hunger for strength because we're perceived as weak and vulnerable, that it's actually working. What does that tell you?
I think it's worrisome, I have to say, because it's simplistic. And I think that the strength of America is the fact that we are a democracy, that we have an electorate that understands the complexity of it, that we are a diverse country, that we are not lying to our people. And part of the problem is that it's very interesting. Russia was a superpower, and it lost. I've actually criticized the first Bush administration for saying that we won the Cold War. They lost the Cold War, and that's not just a semantic difference. The system did not work, and they are trying to revive some kind of a myth about what the Russian Empire was, and that's what Putin has identified himself with. It's a country, I'm not a shrink, but it is a country with an identity problem. And he has identified himself with that. And what I'm afraid of here is that Trump is a gift to Putin. And after what we read today about Putin's or Trump's involvement with Russian finances, I think we now think that Putin is a gift for Trump.
Do you understand what Madeleine's talking about in terms of Trump? Or just-
I
just
mean,
for
I
those- for
really
those
do
out-
think there's a real question that I have in terms of what is going on here.
The speculation is this. Trump has a lot of debt. Any developer would, right? I mean, you don't want to spend your own money any more than you have to. You try to lever as much as you can, especially in commercial real estate, which is almost exclusively where he has done well. The main bank, Deutsche Bank, that holds a lot of his paper, securitizes their debt. Collateralize it, securitize it, make it to a security, sell it off. They do not have a requirement to file on whom they sell it off to. Even after everything we went through in 2007 and 2008, you still don't have to say who have all the derivatives and different things that you securitize. But we do know that Deutsche Bank did sell certain amounts of those assets to Russian holders. And that then means, just the simple syllogy is, Trump's properties are now owned on the underlying paper by Russia. And that would be something that raises a question, which is why he's being pushed for more disclosure. Not to damn him, but to explain what could be a potential conflict.
And I think maybe there's an explanation for it. But I do think, let's go back to something that you said. I do think America's strong. I think America's great, and I think it's strong. And it is based on our value system and on the fact that we are able to deal with criticism, that we are able to respond to questions, that people value the freedom of the press, freedom of association. And I think that at this point, the Russians are under a different kind of a system. And for us to admire somebody that is running an authoritarian system does not speak well. I think that what we clearly are not perfect, but I do think that there is so much strength in terms of who we are, and we need to be proud of that, and we don't need to be afraid. I don't think that Americans have to fear. I think that we are a strong country, and we are a great country.
Last question, and then we'll go do some shots at the bar. The question is this. Sweet strength. When I was growing up, my pop, who passed away, you know who I am, you know who my father was, loved Madeleine. Loved Madeleine because of her mind, loved Madeleine because of her immigrant intensity and her desire to make this country better out of a sense of obligation, like Pete Peterson. So Pop loved her. And he believed that you were a great example of what he thought the defining American ideal was, which wasn't simply strength, it was sweet strength. Pop had a philosophy that he believed that the reason that Newt Gingrich, whom he also liked and toured the country with debating, the reason he didn't succeed with the contract with America, which he called the contract on America, which was very funny, although it was weird because he was Italian and made it seem like fun, was that harshness doesn't win in America. That the American heart is sweet, not harsh at the end of the day. Is that still true?
I think it is. By the way, I loved your father, and I've been involved in politics a long time, and when he would speak at a convention or anywhere, everybody listened. And he really touched people in the way that he saw America. I do think we are sweet people. And let me just say this. Let's go back to my story. We lived in Europe during the war, and were refugees twice. And when we were someplace, people would say, we're so sorry your country's been taken over by Czechoslovakia, by a terrible dictator. You're welcome here, and when are you going home? When we came to the United States, people said, we're so sorry your country's been taken over by a terrible system. You're welcome here, and when will you become a citizen? And my father said, that is what made America different. And we were welcomed here, and we worked hard, and we do care about other people. I think Americans are the most generous people in the world, and we want to be able to help other countries because we understand when there's a natural disaster or something terrible happens. And I think the issue is how our country is able to translate that in our leadership of people that are not always threatening everybody and saying we don't want anything to do with them. We cannot exist in the world today without the help of others. That is not a sign of weakness. That is a sign of strength in terms of recognizing that the issues that are out there require cooperation and partners. And that's why I think we need to explain that during this election. It is not threatening people. It is not yelling at people. It is not saying that we need to be great again. We are great. And I am so grateful to be an American.
I don't know what happens in the election, but you won tonight.
Thank
Madeleine
you.
Albright.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Yes.
Do not put this on. These are for you.
Thank you. Thank
Only
you.
there is half as lovely
Well,
as you.
thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. This is great. All right, let's see if I can get